Paralyzed woman left alone at cafe on first date. Then a stranger CEO with a little girl walked up. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Emma had always dreamed of a fairy tale romance, the kind she used to read about in books and watch in movies. But after her accident, everything changed. At 28 years old, Emma found herself paralyzed from the waist down, her once vibrant life reduced to hospital visits and rehabilitation. Today, she was at a cafe, sitting alone at a table set for two, nervously adjusting the hem of her dress, feeling out of place in a world that seemed to have forgotten her. Her date was late. Her wheelchair felt like a heavy reminder of everything she had lost. She had hoped that today might be different. Maybe, just maybe, someone would look past her disability and see her for who she truly was, a woman with dreams, with hopes, with a heart to love. She had met Kevin online, and the connection had seemed promising. They had texted back and forth for weeks, but now that she was here, sitting alone in a cafe surrounded by couples, Emma wasn't so sure. Her fingers nervously tapped the rim of her coffee cup. She looked around at the people laughing, chatting, holding hands, and felt the pang of loneliness. What if he didn't show? What if he was just another man who couldn't handle the truth of who she had become? Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. She quickly checked it, but it wasn't Kevin. It was a text from her best friend, Jenny. You'll be fine, Em. He's going to love you. I just know it. Emma sighed and put her phone down, trying to push away the anxiety. The sound of the door opening made her look up. A man entered, holding the hand of a little girl, who was wearing a bright yellow dress and had pigtails bouncing with each step. The man was tall, dressed in a well-tailored suit that looked expensive but didn't scream, "Look at me." He glanced around the room, and, to Emma's surprise, his gaze landed on her. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and he smiled. The little girl tugged at his hand, pointing toward the empty seat across from Emma. Without hesitation, he walked over and asked, "Is this seat taken?" Emma, startled by the sudden approach, stammered, "No, it's not. You can sit here." The man sat down, and the little girl climbed onto the chair next to him, still looking at Emma with curious eyes. "Hi, I'm James, and this is Sophie," the man said, offering his hand. "I'm Emma," she replied, shaking his hand, still feeling a little confused. He seemed friendly, but this wasn't her date. She quickly glanced around, hoping to see Kevin walking in, but the cafe was still bustling with people. "Are you waiting for someone?" James asked, noticing her glance. Emma hesitated, but then nodded. "Yeah, I'm supposed to meet someone, but I think they're running late." James smiled kindly. "Well, if it helps, I can keep you company for a while." His offer was simple, but something about it made Emma feel at ease. She had been expecting awkward silence, but his presence felt warm, like a quiet reassurance. Sophie, still looking at Emma, suddenly asked, "Are you a superhero?" Emma couldn't help but laugh. "No, I'm not." "Why do you think that?" Sophie's eyes sparkled. "Because you look like you have superpowers. You're sitting all by yourself, but you're still so beautiful." Emma was taken aback by the compliment. It had been a long time since anyone had said anything like that to her. She smiled softly. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means a lot." James chuckled and patted Sophie's head. "She's always full of surprises." Emma looked at the two of them, realizing that for the first time in a long while, she wasn't thinking about her wheelchair or the accident. She was just a woman, sitting across from a stranger, sharing a moment of unexpected connection. But as the minutes passed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was different about this encounter. Was it just kindness? Or was there something more to this strange man and his daughter? As they continued to sit at the cafe, the conversation between Emma, James, and Sophie flowed effortlessly. Emma was surprised by how easy it was to talk to James, given how nervous she had been just moments before. Sophie, with her endless curiosity, asked Emma about everything from her favorite food to her hobbies. Emma found herself smiling more than she had in a long time. There was something genuine about this little girl, something that made her forget about the nerves and insecurities that had plagued her for so long. James watched the interaction with a quiet smile, occasionally joining in with a joke or a kind word. As they talked, Emma felt a subtle shift inside her. Like the weight of her disability, the constant reminder of her paralysis was growing a little lighter. She could feel the kindness in their words, their presence, and it was like a small piece of her heart was thawing. Sophie's laughter was like music to Emma's ears, and she found herself sharing stories of her own childhood, her dreams, and the art she once loved to create. "I used to paint all the time," Emma admitted, her voice soft. "But after the accident, I just couldn't bring myself to pick up a brush." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I can understand that. But sometimes, it takes a little time to heal before you can do the things you love again." Emma looked at him, her heart beating a little faster. There was something so comforting about his words, something that made her feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. Sophie, who had been listening intently, suddenly piped up, "When I grow up, I want to be an artist too. Can I paint with you one day?" Emma's heart swelled at the innocent offer. "Of course, sweetheart. I would love that." Just then, Emma's phone buzzed, and her heart skipped a beat. It was Kevin. She had almost forgotten about him in the whirlwind of the conversation. She quickly checked the message, feeling a mix of excitement and uncertainty. "Hey, I'm so sorry I'm late. I just finished a meeting. Can we meet up now?" Emma took a deep breath, her heart pounding in her chest. She hadn't expected Kevin to actually show up after all this time. But here he was, apologizing for being late. She wasn't sure how to feel. Part of her was relieved to know he hadn't stood her up, but another part of her felt like she had already found a connection with James and Sophie that was more real than any first date she had ever been on. "I think I need to go," Emma said softly, looking at James. "Kevin is here." James nodded, understanding in his eyes. "It was nice meeting you, Emma. And if you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Sophie gave Emma a hug, surprising her. "You're my friend now, right?" Sophie's words melted Emma's heart. "Yes, I'm your friend," she said, her voice thick with emotion. As Emma rolled her wheelchair toward the door, she glanced back at James and Sophie one last time. The warmth from their kindness lingered with her, but she couldn't help but feel conflicted. She had just met Kevin, but she wasn't sure if he could offer her the same connection she had felt with these two strangers. Maybe, just maybe, she had finally found what she had been looking for, not in the man she thought was meant for her, but in the kindness of a stranger and the purity of a little girl's love. As Emma wheeled herself toward the exit, her thoughts were a whirlwind. The cafe door opened, and she hesitated for a brief moment before stepping outside into the cool evening air. The last hour had been a blur of emotions, laughter, and unexpected connections. Sophie's bright smile, the warmth in James' eyes, it all felt so genuine, so different from what she had expected. As she reached the curb, her phone buzzed again. It was Kevin, reminding her they were supposed to meet. Emma glanced down at her phone but paused, staring at the screen, unsure of what to do next. She had waited for this moment, a chance at normalcy. But the more she thought about her time with James and Sophie, the more she questioned whether she had been looking for love in the wrong place. Her heart had felt lighter with them. But could she just leave Kevin waiting after all this time? She rolled back into the cafe, uncertainty gnawing at her. Kevin stood by the door, a little more disheveled than she remembered from their online chats. His smile was wide but didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, Emma, sorry I'm late. Traffic was a nightmare." He looked around, unsure of how to continue. "I guess you already started?" Emma nodded, feeling a little guilty. "I did. I had a great conversation with James and Sophie. They're really nice." Kevin's smile faltered for a second, and he quickly covered it up. "I see. I didn't mean to keep you waiting." There was something in his tone that made Emma uneasy. She had hoped for a spark, a connection, but she didn't feel it. Kevin was a nice guy, but he didn't seem to understand her the way James and Sophie did. "I think I'm going to head home," Emma said, trying to make it sound casual. Kevin looked surprised, then a little disappointed. "Already? We haven't even ordered yet." "I know, but I don't think this is going to work out," Emma replied, her voice soft but firm. "I'm really sorry." Kevin blinked, seemingly taken aback. He opened his mouth to say something, but then hesitated. "Well, if you change your mind, you know where to find me." Emma gave a polite smile, wheeling herself out of the cafe. She felt a wave of relief as she stepped back outside. The air felt fresher, the evening a little brighter. She wasn't sure where this unexpected path would take her, but something deep inside told her it was the right choice. As she rolled toward the street, a familiar figure caught her eye. James and Sophie were standing by a food truck, Sophie holding a small bag of cotton candy, laughing. When they saw her, Sophie ran up to her with a big smile. "Emma, you came back." James walked over slowly, giving her a knowing look. "I didn't think you would." Emma smiled back, feeling a warmth she hadn't realized she needed. "I changed my mind. I'm glad I did." James nodded, his eyes sincere. "We're glad too." Sophie tugged on Emma's sleeve. "Do you want to come with us to the park? We're going to feed the ducks." Emma's heart melted at the offer. It felt so simple, so pure. She hadn't had a moment like this in what felt like forever. "I'd love that," Emma replied, her voice soft with gratitude. As they walked together toward the park, Sophie chatting excitedly about the ducks, Emma felt a sense of peace she hadn't expected. She didn't need to look for love in a first date. She had found something more real, more genuine, in the kindness of two strangers. And maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what she had been searching for all along. The park was peaceful, with the soft chirping of birds and the rustling of leaves as Sophie led Emma towards the pond. The sun had dipped below the horizon, casting a warm orange glow across the water. Sophie skipped ahead, her pigtails bouncing with each step, while James walked beside Emma, a quiet presence. They reached a small bench near the water's edge, and Sophie eagerly sat down, pulling out a small bag of breadcrumbs to feed the ducks. "Come on, Emma. The ducks are so hungry." Sophie's excitement was contagious, and Emma couldn't help but smile. She took a seat beside her, watching as the little girl scattered the crumbs. James sat down beside her, his gaze fixed on the ducks as well, but his attention was on Emma. "I'm glad you decided to come with us," he said softly, his voice carrying an unexpected sincerity. Emma glanced at him, her heart still unsettled from the events of the evening. "I'm glad too. I wasn't sure at first, but I needed this. I didn't realize how much I needed something simple, like this." James nodded, his lips curling into a small smile. "Sometimes, the simplest things bring the most peace." Sophie looked up at them, her bright eyes wide with curiosity. "Do you like ducks, Emma?" Emma chuckled. "I do, actually. When I was little, I used to come to places like this with my parents. I always loved watching the ducks." Sophie grinned, proud of herself for starting the conversation. "Maybe we can come back and bring more bread for the ducks next time." Emma's heart warmed at the thought of spending more time with them. She had come here expecting a simple outing, but she was beginning to realize how much she had gained from this unexpected connection. "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Sophie," Emma said, her voice full of affection. "I think I'd like that very much." The evening passed slowly, the tension from earlier fading away as they continued to feed the ducks and talk about the little things in life. As the sky grew darker, Emma felt a sense of comfort that she hadn't felt in a long time. It wasn't just the ducks or the park that made her feel at peace, it was the people around her. She had met James and Sophie only a short while ago, but somehow, they had become the anchor she hadn't known she needed. James seemed to understand her in a way no one else had. His quiet strength and genuine kindness made her feel seen, not just as a woman in a wheelchair, but as a person. She wasn't just someone to pity or avoid. She was someone worth spending time with. As the last of the breadcrumbs were scattered and the ducks swam away, Sophie yawned and snuggled closer to her father. "I think it's time to go home, sweetie," James said softly, placing his hand on her head. Sophie nodded, her eyelids heavy. "Can we come back tomorrow?" she asked, her voice thick with sleep. "We'll see," James replied, his tone warm. Emma smiled as they stood up to leave. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt like she was on the right path. As they walked back towards the exit, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of gratitude. Maybe love wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. Maybe it was about the quiet, everyday connections, the kindness between strangers, the small acts of care, and the unexpected surprises life brought her way. And as she glanced at James and Sophie, she realized that in the simplest moments, she had found something truly beautiful. The following days passed in a blur of quiet moments and unexpected connection. Emma found herself spending more time with James and Sophie, and with each passing day, she began to feel something shifting inside her. The sense of loneliness that had defined so much of her life seemed to fade, replaced by a warmth that came from genuine companionship. She had not expected this. She had not expected to find solace in the company of strangers. But here they were, two people who had shown her more kindness in a few days than she had experienced in years. One evening, as they sat together in the park again, Emma looked at James, her heart full of gratitude. "You know," she began softly, "I never thought I would find peace like this. It's strange, but in the best way possible." James, who had been silently watching Sophie chase after a butterfly, turned to her with a quiet smile. "I know what you mean," he said, his voice calm. "Sometimes, life has a way of leading us to places we never expected." Sophie ran up to them, her cheeks flushed from running. "Mommy, I caught a butterfly," she exclaimed, holding up her tiny hands. Emma laughed and reached out, gently taking the butterfly from Sophie's hands. "You're amazing," Emma said, her eyes shining with warmth. "I don't think I could ever catch one of those." Sophie beamed. "I'll teach you, Emma. You have to be quick, like me." Emma smiled, feeling the joy that only a child's innocence could bring. As they continued to talk and laugh, Emma's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and saw a message from her sister. "How's everything going? You okay?" Emma hadn't told anyone about the changes happening in her life. She had been so focused on surviving that she hadn't allowed herself to really live. But now, with James and Sophie, she realized something important. Life wasn't just about existing. It was about truly connecting with the people around you. It was about love, kindness, and finding beauty in the smallest moments. Emma typed a quick reply to her sister, then put her phone down. "You know," Emma said, her voice filled with a soft determination, "I think I'm ready to start painting again." James looked at her, his expression gentle. "I think that's a wonderful idea. I'm sure you'll create something beautiful." Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, you can paint the butterfly I caught." Emma laughed again, the sound light and carefree. "I'll try, Sophie," she said, her heart lighter than it had been in so long. The next few days were filled with small, but significant moments. Emma returned to the art studio, where she began to sketch again, her hands guided by a new sense of purpose. James and Sophie continued to be a steady presence in her life, supporting her as she rediscovered her love for painting. But something else was beginning to stir inside Emma. A feeling that, despite the comfort she had found in her new friendship, there was something more, something deeper. One evening, as they sat together in the park, the air growing cooler with the arrival of fall, James turned to her with a thoughtful expression. "Emma," he said quietly, "there's something I need to tell you." Emma looked at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" she asked, her voice full of curiosity. "I've been meaning to tell you this for a while," James continued, taking a deep breath. "Sophie and we've been alone for a long time. After my wife passed away, I wasn't sure if I would ever open myself up to anyone again. But then I met you, and something changed. I don't know if this makes sense, but I think I found something in you that I've been missing." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure what to say. She had felt a connection with James, but she hadn't expected him to feel the same way. "James," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know what this is, but I feel it too." There was a long pause as they sat in silence, the weight of the moment sinking in. Then, slowly, James reached out, his hand gently touching hers. "I'm not asking for anything right now," he said softly. "I just wanted you to know how much you mean to me." Emma looked at him, feeling a mix of emotions, surprise, warmth, and something deeper that she couldn't quite name. But one thing was certain. Whatever this was, it was the beginning of something beautiful. And as they sat there, hand in hand, Emma realized that sometimes the best things in life came when you least expected them. As the days went on, Emma felt something growing inside her. It wasn't just the renewed joy from painting again or the warmth of Sophie's infectious smile. It was something deeper. The connection she had with James was undeniable, but now, there was an undercurrent of something more. She had always been cautious with her heart, especially since the accident, but with James, everything seemed different. It wasn't just his kindness toward her, it was the way he looked at her, like she mattered beyond her wheelchair. As the weekend approached, Emma found herself lost in thought more often than not. She spent hours in her small studio, painting more than she ever had in months. Each brushstroke felt like a release, an expression of everything she had been holding in. But even as she painted, her mind would wander back to the park, to the quiet moments she had shared with James and Sophie. One Saturday afternoon, James invited her and Sophie to a small local art gallery opening. "It's nothing fancy," he had said, "but I thought you might enjoy it." Emma had agreed immediately, touched that he would think of her. As they entered the gallery later that evening, Sophie holding Emma's hand tightly, Emma couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The walls were lined with paintings and sculptures, each one telling a unique story. But what caught Emma's attention was not the art itself. It was the way James was looking at her, his expression soft but intense. They walked through the gallery together, and as they approached a piece of abstract art, James turned to Emma. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice quiet but sincere, "about what I said the other night." Emma looked at him, her heart pounding in her chest. "You mean about finding something in me that you've been missing?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. James nodded, his eyes meeting hers. "Yes, and I've realized something. I don't just want to be your friend, Emma. I want to be more than that. I think I've fallen for you." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected him to say it so plainly, but there it was, his heart laid bare before her. Sophie, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, looked up at them with innocent curiosity. "Are you two in love?" she asked, her voice bright and hopeful. Emma's heart swelled at the simplicity of the question. She glanced at James, who gave her a small, tender smile. "I think we might be," Emma replied, her voice soft but certain. James reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "I've never felt like this before, Emma. I don't want to rush anything, but I don't want to hide how I feel either." Emma looked at him, feeling a wave of emotion wash over her. She had been so afraid to open her heart again, but now, with James, it felt right. "I feel the same way," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. For a moment, they simply stood there, hands intertwined, as Sophie bounced around them, unaware of the deeper moment unfolding between her father and Emma. As the evening drew to a close, James walked Emma and Sophie back to her apartment. The night air was cool, but Emma felt warm inside. When they reached her doorstep, she turned to James. "Thank you for today, for everything." James smiled, his eyes shining with sincerity. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just glad we're here, together." Sophie tugged on Emma's sleeve. "Are you going to be with us forever now?" she asked, her voice full of innocence. Emma knelt down, smiling at the little girl. "I don't know about forever, but I'll be with you as long as I can," she said softly. Sophie grinned, satisfied with the answer. As Emma closed the door behind her, she leaned against it for a moment, letting out a deep breath. Something had changed, something beautiful and unexpected. She wasn't sure what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure. She was no longer alone. And for the first time in a long time, she was ready to embrace whatever came next. The following weeks were a whirlwind of emotions for Emma. She had always been cautious about getting too close to anyone after her accident, but with James, everything felt different. There was a connection between them that couldn't be ignored, but it wasn't just him. Sophie had become a part of her life too. The little girl's innocence and kindness had melted Emma's heart in ways she didn't expect. They had become a family of sorts, but Emma wasn't sure where the relationship was going. Was it love? Was it just the comfort of not being alone anymore? She didn't know, and that uncertainty lingered in the back of her mind. One evening, James invited her to a dinner with his colleagues. "I know it's a bit of a work thing," he said, "but I'd really like you to meet some of the people I work with." Emma hesitated. She wasn't used to these kinds of social events anymore. The idea of being in a room full of people she didn't know, especially in her wheelchair, made her nervous. But then she thought about Sophie's bright smile and James' gentle encouragement, and she found herself agreeing. The night of the dinner, she dressed carefully, choosing a simple yet elegant dress that made her feel confident. She arrived at the event with James, her heart racing as they entered the upscale restaurant. The atmosphere was filled with chatter, laughter, and clinking glasses. It was the kind of place where everyone seemed to be talking business, but Emma was still drawn to the warmth of it all. As they mingled with James' colleagues, Emma realized that her anxiety was slowly fading. James was by her side, introducing her to people, making her feel like she belonged there. She smiled and laughed, not just out of politeness, but because she was starting to feel at ease in this new world. But then, As the evening progressed, Emma found herself in a conversation with one of James' business partners, a woman who couldn't stop asking about Emma's background. "So, what is it that you do?" the woman asked, her tone too curious for comfort. Emma paused, unsure of how to respond. She had once been a successful artist, but now? She hadn't really had the chance to pursue her dreams in so long. "I'm getting back into painting," Emma replied finally, her voice steady despite the self-doubt creeping in. "It's something I used to love, and I'm rediscovering it." The woman smiled, but there was a sharpness to her gaze. "That's nice," she said. "But I imagine it's hard to be an artist when you're limited in what you can do." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected the question to be so blunt, so dismissive. She wanted to say something sharp, something that would cut through the woman's condescension, but instead, she simply smiled and nodded. "It's a challenge, but it's also freeing in a way," she said, forcing herself to stay calm. "I've learned to create in different ways." The conversation ended awkwardly, and Emma excused herself to find James. She needed a break from the judgment, from the questions that made her feel small. As she rolled away, she spotted James talking to a group of colleagues across the room. He caught her eye and immediately excused himself, walking over to her. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his hand resting on her shoulder. Emma gave a small, forced smile. "I'm fine. Just needed a moment." James didn't press her, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of concern. "You're stronger than you give yourself credit for," he said, his voice filled with admiration. Emma's heart warmed at his words. She didn't need to explain herself to him. He understood. As the night wore on, Emma felt a shift inside her. She realized that while she might not have all the answers, she was growing stronger. She was finding her voice again, and for the first time in a long time, she felt ready to embrace the future, whatever it might hold. When the dinner ended and they left the restaurant, James squeezed her hand gently. "I'm proud of you, he said, "for being yourself, no matter what anyone else thinks." Emma smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, James. That means more than you know." As they walked out into the cool night, Emma felt a sense of peace. She had come so far from the woman who had once felt invisible. Now, with James and Sophie by her side, she felt like she could finally start to heal, to truly live again. The days after the dinner felt like a turning point for Emma. As she continued to spend time with James and Sophie, something inside her began to shift. The uncertainty she had carried for so long, the fear of getting too close to someone, was slowly fading. She felt herself opening up in ways she hadn't in years. It wasn't just about finding a new family with James and Sophie. It was about rediscovering herself, her passions, and her own worth. One evening, after a quiet dinner at home, James turned to Emma, his expression thoughtful. "Emma," he said gently, "there's something I've been wanting to ask you. It's been on my mind for a while now." Emma looked at him, her heart suddenly racing. "What is it?" she asked, her voice soft with curiosity. James hesitated, as though weighing his words carefully. "I've been thinking about the future. I know we've only known each other for a little while, but I feel like I'm ready to take the next step. Not just with you, but with Sophie too." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. She had thought about the future too, but hearing James say it out loud made her heart skip a beat. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. James reached out, taking her hand in his. "I want us to be a family," he said, his eyes sincere. "I want you to be a part of Sophie's life, and I want to be a part of yours. I know it's a big step, but I believe in us. I believe in what we've started." Emma stared at him, her mind racing. The words he had spoken were everything she had been secretly hoping for, but hearing them from him made them feel so real. She had never imagined her life could turn out this way, that she could be loved and accepted in such a way. Sophie, who had been playing with her toys in the next room, ran over when she heard the conversation. She climbed up onto the couch beside Emma, her small hand reaching for Emma's. "I like it when we're all together," Sophie said, her voice full of innocence and hope. "Will we stay together forever?" Emma looked at Sophie, her heart full. She didn't have all the answers, but in that moment, she knew what she felt. She had found a family in them, and she wasn't going to let it go. "I think so," Emma whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I think we'll stay together forever." James smiled, his eyes full of relief and happiness. "That's all I want," he said softly. As the evening wore on, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something beautiful was unfolding in her life. For the first time, she wasn't afraid to dream about the future. She wasn't afraid of the unknown, because with James and Sophie by her side, she felt like she could face anything. The next day, Emma decided to take a step she had been putting off for months. She finally picked up her paintbrush again, letting the colors and the strokes flow freely across the canvas. She had always loved painting, but after the accident, she had doubted whether she could still create the way she once did. But today, as she painted, she realized something important. She was still the same person, with the same dreams. She had just been waiting for the right moment to start again. James and Sophie were in the next room, and the sounds of their laughter filled the apartment, grounding her in the reality that this was where she belonged. This was her family now. As Emma stepped back from her canvas, she smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. She wasn't just creating art. She was creating a new life. And it was everything she had ever wanted. As the months passed, Emma's life continued to unfold in ways she had never imagined. The small apartment that once felt so empty was now filled with laughter, warmth, and the soft murmur of Sophie's endless curiosity. James had become not just her partner, but her rock, the person who had believed in her even when she couldn't believe in herself. They had settled into a routine, one that brought them closer together each day. Emma's painting had evolved into something more than a hobby. It had become her form of expression, her way of processing everything she had been through. She had set up her own small studio, and her art was starting to gain attention from local galleries. James supported her every step of the way, attending openings, helping with her supplies, and always offering a kind word when she doubted herself. One afternoon, as they sat in the park, Sophie tugged at Emma's sleeve. "When are we going to have a big party?" Sophie asked, her eyes bright with excitement. "A party?" Emma laughed, glancing at James. "What kind of party?" "A wedding party," Sophie said, jumping up and down. "You and Daddy should get married, so we can have cake and balloons." Emma and James exchanged a surprised glance, both of them taken aback by the question. James smiled softly, his hand reaching for Emma's. "You know, Sophie might be onto something," he said, his voice tender. Emma felt her heart skip a beat. She hadn't expected this. Marriage had never seemed like something she needed. After all, she had never believed in fairy tales. But now, sitting next to James, with Sophie's innocent question hanging in the air, she realized how deeply she had come to love them both. "Maybe one day," Emma said, her voice thick with emotion. Sophie grinned. "You should do it soon, so I can wear a pretty dress." That evening, after Sophie had gone to bed, Emma and James sat together in the quiet of their apartment. The soft hum of the city outside was a reminder of how far Emma had come, from the lonely woman in the cafe to the woman sitting beside a man who loved her. "James," Emma said, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "I don't know what the future holds, but I know that with you and Sophie, I found something I never thought I'd have. I found a family." James reached for her hand, his gaze filled with warmth. "And I found everything I've been looking for. In you," he said. "You make me want to believe in love again, Emma." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their words settling between them. Finally, Emma spoke, her voice a whisper. "Let's get married." James looked at her, his eyes widening in surprise. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. Emma nodded, her heart full. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." The days that followed were filled with excitement and planning. Emma, James, and Sophie created the kind of wedding Emma had once thought impossible for her. A small, intimate ceremony with just a few close friends, a simple garden, and a celebration of the family they had built together. When the day arrived, Emma stood in front of James, her heart racing. Sophie, wearing the most beautiful dress, stood beside them, her eyes shining with joy. As they exchanged vows, Emma realized that this moment was everything she had ever wanted. Not the fairy tale she had dreamed of, but something even better, a love built on kindness, trust, and the bond of family. "I promise to love you, in all things, for all of our days," James said, his voice filled with conviction. "And I promise to be your family, forever," Emma replied, tears in her eyes. As they kissed, the crowd cheered, but Emma only had eyes for James and Sophie. They were her family now, and she had finally found the home she had been searching for. The days ahead would hold their challenges, but Emma was ready to face them. not alone, but with the two people who had shown her the power of love and the beauty of connection. And as she looked into James' eyes, she knew that no matter what the future held, they would always be together. Family, in every sense of the word.